Hi guys, it's Juliana with Books, Bites, and Date Nights. So I recorded a video yesterday about the Shepard King series, which is One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. But I'm still really new to all of this and it's just something I'm trying out. And going back and looking at it, I just felt like the videos seemed really inauthentic and they were kind of boring and slow. So I'm gonna try again. And unfortunately, I don't have the books with me anymore because I am a huge proponent and user of my local public library, which is really amazing. It has an amazing kids section. And overall, I love libraries. I think they're wonderful and should be super accessible to anybody. So use your library, but I had to return them to the library, so I don't have them with me anymore. I really wanted to talk about them because reading the description of the book, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. So One Dark Window, and really the whole Shepard King series, takes place in the kingdom of Blunder, which is full of dark magic. And magic is controlled essentially in two ways. One is through the use of these cards called the Providence cards that gives the holder of the card a specific magical power, and it depends on what the card is. That's what the power you have is. And then the other is that sometimes people are infected with a fever and that leaves them with a magical gift. Although I don't want to call it a gift because it's kind of a curse, because people who have been infected with the fever are put to death by the king. Now, also, even if they weren't put to death, like one of the main overriding themes of the book is nothing comes for free, especially magic. So if you were infected by the fever that gives you magic, you start to degenerate, whether that is you go crazy or your body starts to degenerate and you're not really yourself. So that kind of sets like the basic background for the book. But it follows a young woman named Elspeth Spindle, who when we meet her, she's 20 years old. She was infected with the fever as a child. I think she was 11, they said. But when the fever went away, she didn't seem to be left with any magical ability, which is how her family has sort of been able to hide the fact that she was infected. But Elspeth does have this voice in her head that she calls the Nightmare, who talks to her and sometimes even kind of like spurs her to take certain actions. So she's terrified that someone will find out that she has this magical ability and that she'll be put to death. So she ends up on this journey to figure out how to free herself from this magic and free the kingdom from the dark magic that has a grip on it, and get rid of the king, who's he's a terrible person. It's a really cool story, a little bit different, not so deep into fantasy that I think it would be hard for, I think you could write, like if you're not a super big fantasy person, you could probably still get into it. And I will say these books had a hold on me while I was reading them. I devoured them. They were just really good. Now, I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a big fan of fantasy or someone who's super into fantasy, but I feel like I do need to say that I loved Harry Potter growing up. It was one of my favorite books. I went to all the midnight release parties that I could, so I am able to come into the fantasy world. And then as an adult, after I'd gotten back into reading, I would say like I didn't really read fantasy, but then I heard about this book Fourth Wing, and people were like, if you don't like fantasy, it's a really good way to get into fantasy for non-fantasy people. So I read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, totally obsessed with the Empyrean series. That's my Roman Empire. So I do want to add that as a little disclaimer that I may be more biased than I think I am about, like, that I'm not as biased towards fantasy, because loved Fourth Wing. Haven't read ACOTAR or anything, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't really have a desire to get super into the Sarah Maas universe. Don't come at me about that. It just seems a little overwhelming, and like all the world building seems very overwhelming for some of these like longer fantasy series, but I did not feel that way with One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. I also do want to mention that the Shepard King duology does have a little bit of spice in it. I would say it's more steamy than spicy, but I just feel like people should know what they're getting themselves into. So there are some spicy scenes, but it doesn't go as far as Fourth Wing. Let me know in the comments below if you read it and what you thought about it, and then also include whether you are typically a fantasy reader or non-fantasy reader, because I'm really interested to see what people think. And I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Thanks, guys.